Do you want to increase the apparent size of your model railroad without building more table? Follow along as I use smaller scale buildings to increase the apparent size of my model railroad by using forced perspective. Forced perspective is one of the little tricks that model railroaders can use by using smaller scale buildings to increase the illusion of depth in your model railroad. Here I use small scale buildings about the size of HO scale buildings on the top of my mountains, blended in with my background to increase the apparent size of my model railroad. Not only did I make the buildings smaller, but I used some blue paint in the overall paint scheme of the buildings to blend in with the background to make it look even further away. Also, I added lights with the diminished voltage to also increase the illusion of being further away. As you know, I like to use mockups. I'm using a simple poster board to mock up the base of the scene that is going to be on the top of my hill. I wanted to make sure it fit up there, and also I wanted to configure the streets. So here I am drawing the roads, the central street. It's going to be a small village up there, which is an extension of the fictitious village that I call Amalfitano. I like to create mock-ups in my projects so that I can visualize what the final outcome is going to be. So I use my trusty foam core to cut the rough shapes of the buildings to an approximate HO scale. I eyeballed it, but I thought the HO scale would give me the ability to have the illusion that it's kind of far away, but not too far away, that an N scale would give my GN15 layout. So HO scale was a good compromise, and on top of that, I could use HO scale figures. I used my trusty hot glue gun to quickly glue up all of the foam core shapes into buildings. I usually do not model anything that can't be seen, so some of my buildings do not have backs to them. I also glue the buildings to the ground template so that it all sticks together. Using mock-ups allows you to visualize what it's going to look like at the end, make any corrections easily without investing a lot of time and effort making the models and then finding out that you don't like it. As you can see, I was going for a very narrow street approach. I also added HO scale tile material. I'll provide a link in the show notes. It's an affiliate link for Amazon. The mock-up showed how the small buildings increased the illusion of the village being bigger than it is. So, making these buildings for my forced perspective background, I've mocked them up in foam core, as I've already been mentioning in the video. And I have now going to lay a layer of insulation foam, cut thin, like this, on my Proxon type foam cutter into thin sheets of layer, and I will glue them on top of the mock-up after cutting out the window openings. Just for buildings that are not going to be lit, I'm going to keep the foam core intact, but in some random buildings, I will cut this window opening completely and add actual window frames and shutters. I'll add shutters to the window openings that are covered. On the foam, I will also scribe in some of the rock formations, kind of at a high level, because this is actually about 32 inches away from the viewer. So I'm going to put in enough detail for them to be able to see it, but nobody's going to be scrutinizing this up close. I draw in the window openings using a template, mark it. Because it's foam, it cuts really easily. And clean. It's far easier than having to carve out the foam core. And you can add texture to it, especially if it's like exposed stone or rock or bricks. So you can take a ballpoint pen. It's my preferred instrument for cutting into details. Now, if this was a foreground model, you should watch my videos on doing buildings, where I have a base layer of foam and a thin layer of plaster, represented by the thin plaster is actually modeled using a thin layer of this foam, cut thin on the Proxon type foam cutter. But because this is a background, forced perspective building, and nobody's going to see it because it's too far away. They're going to be approximately 32 inches away. So it does not have to be two layers like the foreground buildings. But here you put in some stones. Best to use reference material to see how the stucco has crumbled off the buildings. Put in some random cracks, and where the exposed stone is. So this is the piece, and it will go here. So next step is to just add some basic Elmer's glue, or PVA, as you guys call it in Europe. You can lightly spread the glue and press to fit. And you move on. I tend to only put in layers where it's going to be seen, so I don't put it on all four sides. In fact, these buildings, if they're not going to be lit, will have bare backs. No sense in putting in things that you do not need to work on because they're not going to be seen. Okay, this is in progress so far. I've been able to cover most of the buildings so far with this thin layer of foam. Some of the buildings have their openings made through. That way I can drill a hole through this cheaper foam, through this layer of street and into the building. And I'll put a LED on it. The lights will sequence on and off. I will diminish the intensity of the light so that it is softer, weaker, so that it'll enhance the illusion of it being further away. This chunk will then fit inside the mountain, and the lighting system will be carved into, the hole will be carved out of here, and the module will be glued in, and then all of the wiring will be attached to the module that's going to be under here. I'm going to use these micro LEDs because these are background buildings, and it's going to increase the illusion of distance. I'm also going to dial down the voltage. So the first step is to glue the LEDs into the building with some hot glue. And then the next step would be to thread the building and the wires through the holes in the base. And it's hopefully a simple matter of just pushing them through. I made the holes using a hot wire. Okay, so next I will hot glue the building into position. Okay. Next, I am using linker plugs from Just Plug. They come like this. You untwist them, and you have a gray wire and a black wire. The gray wire is the positive, and the black wire is the negative. And the way this works is you press down when you are inserting the wire. So I'm going to insert the wire by pressing down on the plug, insert the wire. Okay, wire is inserted. You then take this end and you insert it into the sequencing hub. And you should have light. No? Yeah. And there is the preliminary lighting of 3 of the buildings. I have 1 more to go. After completing the lighting project, I cut a thin strip of the insulation foam and shaped it to form a retaining wall. And I carved it using a ballpoint pen and then hot glued the resulting wall to the side of the foam base. And then I use my tried and true black paint undercoat first, and then use a series of buff colors to color the bricks. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed the demonstration. I certainly enjoyed it. I think with the buildings in a compressed size, with a little bit of blue paint added to the overall paint scheme of the buildings, in combination with the background, and even in the mirror that I installed in one of the buildings, it really creates the illusion that my small village in GN15 continues on. Thank you for visiting the little fishing village of Amalfitano. Please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. Until next time, arrivederci.